The Seahorse Effect by Sierra Steinbrecher. Chapter 9. Transference.
Are you ready?
Anakin asked from the hallway outside the apartment's main bedroom. Yes, Padme called, and she opened the door. She put on a loose top that ended just under her bust and the equally loose shorts that hugged the tops of her thighs to leave her stomach area entirely uncovered. Her hair was pulled into a loose braid at the back of her neck to keep it out of the way in a comfortable manner. Anakin was dressed the same way, though his braid was much shorter. They were making the transfer tonight. Slightly trembling, Padme walked over to the kitchen where they'd tried to replicate a hospital setup. The table was covered in clear plastic wrap to keep things sterile and make cleaning up easier once they were finished and able to move again. She really hoped they'd be able to get up and clean up easily without a huge mess. If there was too big of a mess, it probably meant she, Anakin, or the baby had bled to death, or worse, all three of them. A shudder racked her at the thought. Anakin must have felt it because he squeezed her hand.
Don't worry, I know what I'm doing, he murmured in her ear. We're all going to be okay.
And he kissed her gently, pressing a hand to her stomach.
Now, are you ready?
No, she wanted to say, but just nodded instead. She laid down on the table with her legs hanging off the edge. Anakin's hands hovered over her middle.
All right, I'm just going to see where the baby is.
He looked at her for permission, and she nodded. His eyes closed as his fingers touched her bare skin. When they opened again, a bright, delighted smile broke across his face.
Padme, there's two of them!
What? She exclaimed from the table. We're having twins?
Yes,
he said, grinning. Then he snatched his hand back and started to pace, smile gone.
We have to stop. I didn't know there were two. What if there's not enough space inside me? What if I'm not fast enough? I need to practice more. I need to make more space. Wait, will this even work with two babies? What if...
Anakin! Padme shouted. He stopped pacing and looked back at her. He's just as scared as I am, she realized. Well, it was her turn to be strong. It will be fine. Still, the fear didn't fade. Women carry twins the same way they would one baby. You'll have enough space.
But...
No, Anakin. She got off the table and walked over to him. You leave on a mission soon. By the time you get back, they'll be too big. With a firm grip, she held his hand and pulled him back towards the kitchen. You can do this. The fear still lingered in his eyes, but he nodded. Ignoring her own nerves, Padme got back onto the table and smiled at him. He smiled back, even though his hands shook when he placed them on her stomach again. Anakin reached out with his senses and found the two tiny bursts of life energy. They were curled up around each other on Padme's left side, right next to the wall of her womb. Slowly, he pulled away from the force and came back to himself.
They're right where they need to be,
he said, and Padme noticed how more of the nervousness had quieted. See? It'll be fine, she encouraged. We should get started. Anakin picked up the IV and carefully inserted the needle into the crook of her elbow. Frankly, he didn't want to know how Padme had gotten that, or the clear pouch of painkiller he attached to the clear tube. Nonetheless, he was happy she had. At least he would be the only one in any pain. Are you sure you don't want some? She asked, gesturing with her free hand at the clear pouch of painkiller. He answered her as he dipped the necessary tools in a sterilizing solution.
I have to be aware for this to work, Padme. We've already talked about this.
Once he finished the sterilization, he wiped his side with a washcloth dampened with rubbing alcohol. Then he grabbed a pen and drew a tall, slim oval on his exposed side. He handed Padme one of the scalpels and a wad of clean cotton.
Ready?
Yes, she answered, very thankful that her voice didn't come out as a squeak. As she sat up, he moved to her right so she had easy access to where he'd drawn on his skin. Steadying her hands, Padme put the tip of the blade at the top of the oval and applied pressure. Anakin hissed at the pain when the point punctured his side, and Padme halted.
Keep going,
he told her through clenched teeth.
But keep going,
he insisted, and his tone allowed for no argument.
I'm fine.
He clearly wasn't, but she did as he asked and finished the cut. Quickly, Padme pressed the cotton to the incision, which bled sluggishly. She watched Anakin's pinched face ease, and he delved into the force, checking inside himself to make sure everything there was ready. The pained expression returned when he surfaced, and she asked, Is everything all right? To her great relief, he nodded, and she laid down, keeping pressure on the cotton. Carefully, Anakin circled around her to her left side and grabbed the second scalpel.
Are you ready?
She nodded and felt the slight pressure as the slim blade sliced into her side. The instant the cut was finished, she removed the padding from Anakin's side, and he lay down next to her, matching up the 2 incisions perfectly. Then he closed his eyes and plunged into the Force. Pain siphoned off into the Force as Anakin entered that state where each cell filled with its own life energy. Easily, he found the 2 bright bundles of life. He briefly checked to make sure they were still fine and moved on to the bigger masses of the 2 placentas. With speed and the ease of much practice, he detached the myriad of blood vessels and nerves running from the side of Padmé's womb to the first placenta. Once he was finished, he grabbed the whole thing and, still concentrating hard, brought it through the narrow slit in Padmé's side, then the one in his side. The second the last cell passed through, he said, "Now!" Padmé shoved another wad of cotton bandaging between the 2 slits. She waited for Anakin to tell her to move again, that the first baby was fine and he was ready for the second one. It seemed only seconds to her before Anakin repeated the command, and she moved the cotton, pressing their sides together again. This time she thought she felt a slight tugging sensation as Anakin moved the second child. When he shouted, "Done!" she slapped an adhesive bandage on her side and grabbed the curved needle and some thread. The Jedi felt the needle as it sewed up the gap, but he didn't let it distract him. He grabbed another of the severed blood vessels from the placenta and grafted it onto one of his. The nerves were harder, but thankfully fewer. He finished attaching the last major nerve bundle and took a moment to check on his children. Both still had strong heartbeats, with no signs of distress. Relief flooded his senses, and he went back to weaving in the blood vessels and other connective tissues. Padmé finished suturing his side wound closed and peeled the bandage off her side. She dipped the needle in the sterilizing solution, grabbed a clean spool of thread, and started to sew her own side shut. When she was about halfway finished, a hand gently took the needle from her. She looked up from her task and saw that Anakin had come out of his Force link. How are they?" she asked.
Fine,
he answered, smiling. Then he kissed her. In the days following, both she and Anakin pleaded illness to avoid their responsibilities. Anakin took the time to heal, and Padmé's body went through what it saw as a miscarriage. But they had done it.